In this video, I'm going to run over my Shadow Bone Storm build, which is super tanky. You're going to basically be Bone Storm 100% of the time, and as long as it's up, you pretty much can't die. So, as long as you play it right, you're going to be solid. I've done up to tier 22 with this, and I think that's pretty good, considering my stats aren't very impressive here, but it works. So, first, let's go through the items. Then we'll go through the skills, the Paragon, and I'm going to show you a quick example of how it works. So for the helmet, we got basics grant 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds, which is really good. This doesn't even have to actually hit an enemy to work. You can just swing it and you get that 20% TR. So that's solid. 45% or 0.45% increase to armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage. This is like a full dot build, so this is going to be maxed out pretty much the entire time. That extra armor is really helpful for when your Bone Storm doesn't stay up, and if it goes down between cooldowns, then this is going to help out a lot. This isn't necessary, but it definitely helps. Corpse Explosion summons a volatile that charges at a random enemy. This just helps out if the enemies aren't standing directly on your body, because you're pretty much going to be standing still for this. So, and it deals like a little bit of extra damage, which helps. This is pretty much our bread and butter here. Bone Storm deals... Each time Bone Storm deals damage to an enemy, you gain a barrier equal to 5% of your base life for 10 seconds. This is what keeps you alive. And 5% is a lot. And with Bone Storm up 100% of the time, this is going to give you a huge shield or barrier. The boots, I don't have anything on right now because I can't seem to really find good boots. But what you're going to want to do is... Blights defiled, this right here, Blights defiled area when spawn pulls enemies in, which is going to be pretty useful for you. So it just helps you crowd everybody together so that they stay on your dot. Again, I don't have a good enough weapon for me to waste an aspect on it, but what I would be using is most likely this. Gain 20% increased critical strike chance after using Corpse Tendrils, and 60% critical strike damage. We don't really... Most of our damage is dot, but with the vulnerable that Corpse Tendril applies, plus spamming Blight, those crits are actually going to help out a lot. And it's going to help you burst damage, because one thing this build is not good at is burst damage. So this will help you a little bit in that area. So... Next, we got our amulet with Bone Storm consumes up to 8 corpses to increase duration by up to 12 seconds. I only have 8.4. Again, I have a max roll on this, but until I get a better amulet, I'm not really gonna waste that. So, I mean, 8 seconds is a ton of time. So, this is what's gonna help keep your Bone Storm up. Then we got... Wait, This isn't supposed to be here. Stand by. Okay, here we go. Got the right ring on here now. So, each time Shadow Blight key passive deals damage to enemies, it increases the next Shadow Blight damage within 10 seconds by 40%, up to 5 times. So that's going to be at max 200% damage every time that Shadow Blight key passive hits, which with the amount of dot we have, it's going to happen a lot. It's going to stay maxed out pretty much. As soon as you get ramped up, it's just going to sit there. And then you deal 85% increased damage for 6 seconds after Shadow Blight key passive damages enemies 10 times. Again, this is going to proc or ping whatever a lot more than you think it will, because the amount of dot we have, this is going to just be on here. These two are going to be firing constantly, and that's what's going to ramp your damage up to be able to actually take down the mobs with such a low damage build. And then finally, we have on our focus, Bone Storm deals darkness damage, which is, our focus, so that helps us out. And it deals, 479 shadow damage over 2 seconds. That's not a lot, but what it does is it helps with our dot. So even though the damage isn't going to make much of a difference, it's the dot that we want. It's just the more hits we get. So what you want to focus as far as affixes is lucky chance and cooldown reduction. Lucky chance is 28% bonus, which is not amazing, but even that low amount still helps out a lot. All right, so let's go over the Book of the Dead quickly. Sack the Reapers for more shadow damage. Pretty no-brainer. 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Enemies are going to be vulnerable like half the time, so this is pretty big. This helps out a lot. And then for golems, 10% max life, because that means more life, more barrier. Pretty much it. As far as gems go, I would go amethyst for your weapons, skulls for your jewelry, and rubies for your armor. Okay. So for skills, we're going to start out with Reap. Reap's going to generate corpses for us. That's really all we need it for. Sometimes it'll generate some essence, but for the most part we won't need to use it for that. Then we're going to go into our core. We have Blight. We want to max that out. Blight is going to slow, which helps us stack damage, and it's also going to give us more damage while people are standing on it. You could go for the immobilize, but I find the damage is a little bit more useful. Alternatively, you could use Sever if you feel like you're lacking in burst damage. But for the dot, I think Blight is better. But I'll go over later how Sever could probably work too. We're just going to take one of these and one of these just for a little bit of extra essence, a little bit of extra damage. But it's honestly not necessary. You could put those somewhere else if you wanted. This Hued Flesh, we got to max this out because we need as many corpses as possible. Which brings us to Corpse Explosion. Definitely going to want to max that out and take the blighted version of it. It's going to lay down a pool. That's one of our main dots outside of Blight. And especially if you go with Sever, you're definitely going to need this. I put a couple into Grim Harvest just to gain some essence as we're going through corpses. You don't really need to max this out because we consume so many corpses. This is going to be fine. But if you don't want to put points up here, you could probably put one extra in there. This is a must. This is pretty much going to be a flat damage buff because once we get started, we're consuming a ton of corpses. So that extra damage is definitely going to help. Down here we got Decrepify, which this is huge here. We only need it for the utility, so we're just going to go with 1 point. And we just really need it for this. It helps with the slow because we'll do more damage to slowed enemies because of some of our passives down here, and we'll also deal more damage, 12%. If well, this will be 9 if you don't have an extra point from gear, but still 9% is good. This is gonna help us with our cooldowns. This is why you want as much lucky hit as you can possibly get, and you want as much DOT on the ground as you can possibly get, because every time this fires, we're closer to making our combo work. So moving on, you're gonna want to get all the shadow passives. I wouldn't max this out because 10% extra movement speed is just not that crucial. You're going to be getting CC'd half the time anyway, and you're going to be standing still a lot, so you don't really need the extra movement speed. When you deal damage to enemies with darkness skills, they take 6% increased shadow damage from you and your minions. Obviously, we don't have minions, stacking up to 3 times. So this is 18%. All of our damage is shadow damage. So this is just a flat buff. Darkness skills deal 9% bonus damage to enemies who are slowed and 9% bonus damage to enemies who are stunned or immobilized. They're always going to be slowed because you're spamming. You're going to keep that Decrepify on them. Sometimes they'll be stunned because of this. So 15% chance to stun for 3 seconds. For darkness skills, again, darkness darkness, darkness. All of our damage and darkness. All of our damage skills are darkness. So enemies are going to get stunned pretty often. So you're in these stacks. So you'll get 18% damage off this a good amount of the time. Corpse tendrils. Again, this is a utility skill, so we only want to put 1 point in it, and then we're going to go over here to vulnerability. So this is going to suck them in and stun them, and this just helps you corral them and keep your dot on them. And again, it's a stun, so it's going to give you that 9% plus the slow that's going to be on them from Decrepify, so that's 18%. Just solid damage there. A lot of, you would think Fortify would help here, but honestly it's kind of just unnecessary, because even if you have Fortify, 10% is just not that much unless you build into it, and you kind of just don't need it. You have, I'd rather go with damage because you're pretty survivable as it is. Bone Storm. This is, again, this is what the whole build basically is carried by. You could go into the 20% crit because it's going to be up a lot of the time. So this could crit a lot. And honestly, you could probably ditch this for crit damage. Or you could ditch one of these, maybe this. But I don't really use it. It would probably be better, to be honest. But whatever. You are going to want to take the damage resistance, though. That's a must. And while this is up, this is just going to be hitting so often that your armor and your barrier are just going to be through the roof constantly. Increases damage reduction by 18%, reduced by 2% for each active minion. We have no minions, sadly. I love minions, but they're just not that good, I don't think. So flat 18% damage reduction is great. Sacrificing both skeleton warriors and skeletal mages increases their sacrifice bonus by 60%. You really don't need this, but with the extra damage they get, I would take it. And then of course we're gonna take Shadow Blight because everything we do is shadow damage. And remember that Bone Storm is also shadow damage. The only damage we have that isn't shadow is corpse tendrils, but this is just for the vulnerable and the CC. So that is it for skills. Let's take a quick look at the Paragon board. And I definitely focus more damage here. I would take all the armor nodes you can. I use darkness, which this is not, probably not the optimal slot. There's not enough willpower to get the bonus here. But I mean more shadow damage, and more shadow damage. And you're definitely gonna want to take Wither. This is a pretty big game changer here too. Just more damage. More damage reduction here for enemies affected by shadow, which is all the time they're going to be affected by shadow. Then you have more resistance, more resistance, more resistance, more damage, more damage, more damage, more damage. I'm probably going to go up to this glyph socket here. I have enough to make it here, but I don't know if I'm ready to go to another board yet. So if you want to, you can just, this is less important, I feel like, to this build, but it definitely does help out. Honestly, I think Amplify, is it? No, not Amplify. Exploit, I think it is. Might be the better one. This is probably a better take, to be honest. Exploit. But I don't have it leveled up, so I'm not going to use it. Alright, so now I'm going to take you into a dungeon and show you exactly what you want to do. Alright, so this is going to be your combo. You're going to run up to the mob. If they're separated, you might want to, try to corral them a little bit, but you want to Decrepify. And you want to swing your basic to grab a corpse. Then you're going to want a corpse tendril. Once they get yoinked in, that's when you pop your Bone Storm. You're going to dump all your essence on Blight, which is going to pull them in even more. And then by that time, you should have lots of corpses on the ground. Spam Corpse Explosion to clear all your corpses. Rinse and repeat. make sure you're dropping your Decrepify every like 8 to 9 seconds. This has to stay up. If this goes down for even a few seconds, you're not going to be able to cool down your Bone Storm before it ends. Another thing to keep in mind, do not Bone Storm before Corpse Tendrils when you're entering like a first engagement, because what's going to happen is you're going to pop Bone Storm, you're going to drop your first corpse, or it's going to eat your first corpse, and then 7 corpses after that. So you're not going to be able to tendril for a good while, which is going to decrease your damage output a lot. So make sure you drop the tendrils, then the Bone Storm, then as many blights as you can, clean up all the corpses, and repeat. So now let's see it in action. So you corral your enemies in a little bit, pop that corpse tendril, Bone Storm, dump the blight, start exploding corpses, and there's not quite enough enemies here for me to get a decent proc. You see here I actually miss it by a couple seconds, but get the Bone Storm back up. And remember, you have 10 seconds after the Bone Storm goes down where you still have a barrier, so you got a little bit of buffer time there. And there's a lot more enemies here, so I'm actually able to knock that cooldown pretty fast. Have a few seconds to spare. So I do grab a lethal shrine here, which is going to help me out with my crit damage, but crits really aren't the focus here. Not to mention I actually don't have one of my Shadow Blight rings on at the moment, so I'm not dealing as much damage as I would. But as you can see, with large mobs, we're able to knock out our cooldown with still half our time up. As far as pros, I would say survivability, consistency, CC, and it's great with dealing with crowds. The more enemies there are, the more the build is really going to shine. Cons: no burst damage or very little, lacks single target damage. If you stall out, you're in trouble, which is usually due to CC. If you get stunned for a while and you can't finish your combo and your Bone Storm runs out, that's bad news. So what you could do to mitigate that is get this aspect: becoming injured while crowd control grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. This is kind of like a panic button that automatically goes off if you're CC'd. That can help if you're having that problem. If you're not, you could always deal 15 to 25% extra damage while barriered, which is going to be most of the time, so that's great help. If you're going to go with Sever, I would recommend getting this. Critical strikes from Sever have a 36%, well, 20 to 40% chance to spawn a pool of blight under the target, which I haven't tested this, but I'm pretty sure that if you have the blight pull, it'll probably still work with this, although I'm not 100% sure. And this will combo really well with this. So if you're going to use Sever, I would definitely go with those two. Alternatively, I don't have this one, but you could use the aspect that has Sever lay a line of blight along its path. That would definitely help maintain your dot, because if you do go with Sever, you're not going to have nearly as much dot, so that's what you're kind of trading off. You'll get burst damage, but you're trading off a little bit of consistency. Overall, I feel like it's a great build. It's clearly very unoptimized in this state. I have no gems. Almost none of my stuff is upgraded. I don't even have all the aspects that are supposed to be here. But it still does well, even in this state. So, and the last clip I showed you, I didn't even have this ring on, so which makes a big difference. So, even unoptimized, it still slaps, you know. But that's about it.